I'll stand for this bit. This is not part of the presentation. It's just a real thank you again, particularly for those of you that weren't here last night, to the Manchester team for the fantastic job that they've done now in 24 hours of moving us from under the sea to way above the sea, looking down upon it. It's been a tremendous job. There is a Manchester stand. We've got a full programme going ahead all week. Thank you to the Reed MIPIM team as well for making sure we've got the accommodation. And with that, I'm going to hand back to, and thank you for coming, by the way, hand back to Greg, and we'll get on with the session.
Great. Richard, thank you very much indeed. Our thanks this morning go to Deloitte and the Manchester at MIPIM team for producing this event for us. The focus here is on technology-enabled cities, what's next. And as in previous years, what we're going to do is invite 5 speakers to share thoughts initially on the subject, and then we'll open it up very quickly for a debate with yourselves. So our panel this morning are as follows. Firstly, Sir Richard Leese, who you've just met once again, the leader of the City of Manchester. He's sitting next to Miguel Pinto Luz. Miguel is the Deputy Mayor of Cascais Municipality in the Lisbon metropolitan area. Sitting next to him, Suzanne Wiley, the Chief Executive of Belfast City Council. Next to her, Tony Vives, the former Deputy Mayor of Barcelona. And next to Tony, Simon Bedford, the partner for the city's advisory at Deloitte LLP. Please welcome the panel. Now, technology-enabled cities is obviously a very big and very current topic. We have the whole debate and discussion about how to use technology platforms to make cities more efficient. We have the interest in the way that the new generation of exponential technologies are driving forward the economy of cities. And we have a very significant focus, of course, on the districts in which both technologies and technology-enabled companies begin to cluster and to form hubs, innovation districts, precincts, and other kinds of words. So there's lots of stuff to chew on here. And we've asked each of our panelists to begin with a sort of a 5-minute reflection in terms of thinking about what's next, what's happening where they are, what are the issues. And I'm going to ask Sir Richard to kick us off again, talking about Manchester, and then we'll go through the remarks from the panel and then get to your questions. Can I just ask, before Sir Richard takes the stage, how many people in the room are from Manchester? If you're from Manchester, please raise your hand. You're obviously very welcome. Who in the room is from somewhere else? Where are you from? London. Lisbon. Cascais, welcome to you. Anyone else? Stafford, welcome to you. Sir Richard, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Good morning again, everybody. I think the notion of the smart city has been around for quite a while now, and I think we're getting familiar with some of the technologies around the notion of the smart city. I think the move that the direction we're going in now is that increasingly that technologies have to start with people rather than starting with the technology itself, starting with people's needs, how we can make life easier, how we can make our cities more sustainable. And I think one of the tasks we have now is, first of all, is to make a lot of the technology invisible, but also to get a lot of the technology joined up. And that's what lies behind one of the programmes that's operating in Manchester at the moment, which is CityVerve. CityVerve is the national demonstrator project. So it's funded by the UK government, and it's a national demonstrator project for the Internet of Things. That's a lot of everyday things that are wired up in various ways, and we start trying to take the soup of all the data and all the information we've got and start to make sense of it. Where you start are very, very practical projects. CityVerve looks at health as a major theme. It looks at transport. It looks at environment and energy. But it also looks at culture and citizen engagement as part of the process, part of how citizens start to have greater knowledge about what's going on in the areas in which they live and start to take greater control over those areas as well. What does it mean in terms of practical projects? Although I suppose you could argue about how practical they are. Shortly we have the talking bus stop in Lee. and that's effectively having a transport system that engages with you. It's starting to have a dialogue. It's starting to use AI. It's starting to do machine learning so that you can start to have a dialogue with your transport system. People want transport on demand now. Whatever mode they're using, they want to know when it's coming and so on. We want more people to walk and cycle. We have issues occasionally with air quality. The ability to be able to not only sense air quality, censoring it would be a good idea as well, to sense air quality, be able to relay that information to pedestrians, to cyclists, so that they can choose their route on the basis of where they're going to get a good, clean journey to work or wherever they're going. I think in the health field, one of the biggest issues we have, certainly in the UK, but I think across Europe, is that our hospitals are full of people with chronic illnesses, manageable illnesses, and there's an issue about how we can use sensor technology, smart inhalers, a whole range of other things in order for people to be increasingly to self-manage the issues that they have, the conditions that they have, but to be able to make support easy to provide as well. So district nurses who can make their appointments remotely, that they don't have to be in touch with a base all the time. District nurses who can have IoT access when they're going to visit somebody who's got demand needs, so that there is easy, secure access to the premises that they're going to. I think that direction of building technology to support real identified needs is the direction we're going to go in, but it's also increasingly about how do we get all that joined up? How do you avoid having 3,000 apps on your phone and not being able to find the one you want? How do you reduce it to a single small number of apps where you can manage all the things you want to do in one simple way? That's what IoT's, the direction it's taking us in, and I think over the next 12 months, we're going to see a very large number of use cases being developed and implemented to see how do we do that in practice. Last thing to say, I want to say before moving on, is who's involved in that. And the people involved, I think, are quite important. It involves the City Council, it involves the universities, but then it involves a whole range of companies that range from big international players, so Siemens, Cisco, British Telecom, or the big companies, right down to small local companies that have a real engagement with local communities. 20 partners in total delivering how we can change the lives of people in the city in a very real way.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. That's kicked us off really well with the Internet of Things, AI, machine learning, lots of technologies. You said right at the start it's all about people and people first, not technology first. But you've given us some amazing applications in the areas of air quality and health, particularly like the idea of the talking bus stop. The only problem is, what's it going to say? And be very interesting to hear a bit later on from people what it does say. Ladies and gents, if you'd like a seat, by the way, there are about 5 or 6 quite near the front, and you're very welcome to come and take them. We'd love you to feel comfortable during the course of the session. Thank you, Sir Richard. Let's move on to Cascais municipality, and we welcome the Deputy Mayor, Miguel Pinto Luz.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation to be here. A brief note, just to say that we'll still like to be known as a town, not a city. Yeah. Despite being a territory of 250,000 inhabitants, we still like to maintain that utopia of being a community and living like a family. 30 seconds to show you what is Cascais. We just turned 654 years this year. We used to be a tourist site. Just for you to know, during the Second World War, we used to say that we had more kings without the throne than 5-star hotels, because the King of Italy, Romania, Hungary, Spain, all those royal families used to live in Cascais. So that's our mindset, a very exquisite place. Paris Match, the French magazine 3 years ago, has compared Cascais as the Portuguese Hamptons. So that's our positioning in global terms. Talking about technology, everybody now talks about smart cities, big data, all those big buzzwords like AI, VR. That's important, of course, but we have smart cities for the last 3,000 years. The Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Romans, they've created sewage systems, waste management systems, roadways to increase the quality of life of those citizens. So we have smart cities for thousands of years now. The big game changer now is to use technology to engage citizens. That's the game changer, because for the last 2,000 years, cities were led by politicians, by city leaders, top-down approach. Now the trend is a bottom-up approach, grassroots approach, where all the citizens can take a stake in the process of creating the city. That's the game changer now. That will help to fulfill the gap between the body of voters and the elected. Nobody trusts anymore on politicians, so we need to find out new ways to engage citizens. And that's what we are doing now. The second thing that will be a game changer is to use technology to predict the future. To use all the sensors, and we have now more than 1 million sensors in Cascais, in the waste management system, in the water supply system, in all the mobility systems, to use all that data to predict the future, to anticipate the future. Those two game changers will completely change the quality of life of our cities. And what we are doing, in terms of mobility, for example, we have created a system that we call Mobi Cascais, where in the same app we can put all the modes of transportation that you can think about. From taxis to Uber, to the bus transportation system, to the railways, to the subways, to even the medical transportation is in the same app. All in the same app with the vision as mobility as a service. You pay a flat fee and you can set up your product in terms of transportation. You can have parking for your car together with the bus, together with bike sharing, or you may add a railway, you may add subway, you may add taxi. So you can bundle which products do you want, and you design your products. Again, you are co-designing the city with the municipality. The second example that I want to bring to the table is our Cascais City Points project. It's a customer engagement system for citizens, because we award our citizens with points, citizens that can give some hours of volunteer work to the community. If you visit a museum, if you go to a hospital and help all the people in the hospital, you are awarded with points, and then you can redeem those points with minutes of parking, minutes of bus transportation. You can get discounts on concerts. So this is a gamification of the city life that we are trying to implement. The third and final example that I want to bring to the table is our participatory budget system. Again, technology, because you can vote on your project using an SMS, using our apps, using our website, and you engage with the city. 20% of our investment budget every year is invested in our participatory budgeting system. And as I mentioned yesterday in our dinner, I can tell you that we have more voters in our participatory budget system than we have in our local elections. I've been elected 4 months ago for a new term of 4 years with less votes than the best project in our participatory budget system. Again, this is a game changer. We are talking about democracy 2.0. Even better, we are talking about democracy 3.0, because politicians will have to change their mindset, of course. Citizens will have to change their mindset, because they can't anymore be seated. They are asked to come and co-create the city with the city mayor, with all the city employees, because we are all as part of this big community that we like to call city. City exists for citizens, and at the end of the day, our core business is to give quality of life to all our citizens.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Let's give him a round of applause, if we may. So you said that despite all of the buzzwords, the key opportunity is to use technology to engage citizens in a different way. And then you gave us the idea of the mobility app that integrates everything to do with transport in Cascais, the gamification approach, bonusing citizens for good behaviours, nudging them in certain directions, and then the participatory budget. And I couldn't help wondering, as you said it, if a certain project has achieved more votes than you in an election, when does the project start giving you instructions? Can't be too far away. So very interesting. Let's go immediately, if we may, to Belfast and welcome the Chief Executive, Suzanne Wiley.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be here this morning. I want to really focus on technology to drive innovation and innovation to drive technology. And whilst I agree with everything that's been said so far, I want to really focus on how we are using technology to drive our competitive advantage as cities and to really stimulate our investor and innovation community as well. And also then how we link that to what's happening in our universities and what's happening with the skills that we are now pumping out for the jobs of the future. So I believe that smart cities shouldn't be just all about the infrastructure and the sensors, etc., but it has to be driven from the vision of the city. It has to set the overarching framework as to what you want to do with your technology and how you want to stimulate innovation and really have standout in this very, very competitive world that all of us that live in cities and work in cities have to look to the future for. So for me, innovation really is where there's a real clash of great ideas and real city needs. And that's something that we in Belfast are really striving for in our smart city framework. So infrastructure is important, of course. And in Belfast, we have, until very recently, been very much ahead of the game, state of the art. We have become a major hub because of our technology. We have become a major hub for financial technology investment with big companies like, for example, Citibank, like Allstate, like Chicago Mercantile, setting up huge footprints in the city of Belfast. And they're doing that because of the skills that they can get in tech and also because of the infrastructure that's there. We have had, for a number of years now, 100 gigabyte per second direct communications link with the US. So you can send data quicker from Belfast to Boston than you can from Boston to the west coast of America. And so the big data hungry companies that are setting up in our city, that's the reason. 10% of the foreign exchange market, the world's foreign exchange market, goes through Belfast on a daily basis because of that technology that we have there. And of course, that's why we now have the film industry there as well, and a lot of television production now happening in Belfast. And I said last night, those of you who don't know, Game of Thrones is obviously shot in Belfast, and in New, we have another large film studio there as well, which is just about to release a sci-fi series on Sci-Fi Channel called Krypton, which is the prequel to Superman. So look out for that as well. We are now the second fastest growing knowledge economy in the UK and the first in Europe for software development as well. And what is it that's really attracting that in Belfast and making that happen in Belfast? Not only that infrastructure and connectivity, but also the skills base that we have. So we are creating, we have a new computer centre in our university. We have centres of excellence in our universities in terms of cybersecurity, which is another major standout for our city. We're a national centre of excellence for cybersecurity. We are number one for foreign direct investment from the US in cybersecurity. It's one of the fastest growing areas in terms of small business in particular in Belfast. And that's happening because there's a lot of clustering going on, and we've created innovation and tech districts within the city, co-located alongside the research and development centres, like our Cybersecurity Innovation Centre, like our medical and nano science innovation centres as well. And that's, for me, the way of the future. We're also trying to stimulate, as I said, the innovator community. So we are trying to look at the city's problems, the city's opportunities, and we're putting out calls to the innovator community with small amounts of money to say, these are the issues, these are the problems. We would like you to come up and design some great ideas as to how you solve these city problems. Come forward to us. We'll give you a small amount of money to come forward with your ideas. We shortlist those ideas. We give them more money for prototypes. They build those prototypes. We use them in the city, and then they can market those around the world, and of course then grow their businesses and expand and export globally in the city. So some of the things that we have been doing in that sphere is we have got machine learning to look at our property tax base and to work out who's not paying their property taxes, which is great for us because that's where I get my money from to invest in the city. We've also been using the Internet of Things, and you mentioned bicycles, for example. So we have sensors on all our Belfast bikes. They are picking up air pollution data. They're picking up all the potholes in the roads, etc., and they're sending all that data back to an IoT platform so that we can solve those problems as well. We're also using urban mapping tools to look at the infrastructure needs of the city in terms of what's being development in the city as well. And we're using drone technology as well for service to customers, and also our assets base in the city as well. So just a few examples. But it does, for me, mean that you really try to create that ecosystem of innovation, linking universities, linking the skills that you're producing in your city, making sure you're focused on your growth sectors as well, and making sure that local authorities like me are actually setting out plans that enable that to all come together and invest in the infrastructure and the technology that is really going to push you and give you that competitive edge. Thank you.
Suzanne, thank you very much indeed. In addition to these important city management apps and intelligent city apps, you spoke quite a lot about jobs right at the start, and you spoke about this comparative advantage that comes from technology and innovation, focusing, you said, on fintech in particular, making use of your advanced connectivity, particularly across the Atlantic. Cybersecurity, you mentioned as a leading edge for Belfast, and of course film and TV. And it's very interesting to see increasingly, as I look at this data all of the time, the number of jobs that are in Belfast that are part of this innovation economy is growing very, very rapidly. And it's fascinating to watch how technology is changing the employment base of the city. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, if anybody's wanting a seat, we have the 3 best seats in the house available down here. And because the show has already started, they're at no cost. So if anybody would like to have a seat, there are 3 seats here, and we want you to be comfortable. Let's go to Barcelona, and former Deputy Mayor Tony Vives, who works not only in Barcelona but all over the world on these issues. Tony, give us your reflection on technology-enabled cities, please. What's next?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here. I want to thank the City of Manchester and Deloitte for having me here. But everything has been said, so I was good. Yeah.
I'm sure you'll find something to add.
What's next? I was about to say next is the beach. We could all go to the beach. Because I see this, and I was thinking about, my book. My book. I was thinking about Richard Hamilton. You know Richard Hamilton, the painter? He used to live half of the year in London and the other half in Cadaqués. If we walked by the sea, we would reach Cadaqués in a day and a half, perhaps. It's 500 kilometers from here. The cost is exactly the same. And he used to paint there. And he's the founder of, he has a kind of wonderful picture called What Is That? What is it that makes our apartments? This was painted in 1957, I think. What is it that makes our apartments so different, so different and so appalling? I think that's the name of the picture. That's at the beginning of the pop art movement. And in that picture, you could see an apartment with a guy in his underwear, with making like push-ups or something, a wife with ironing or doing whatsoever, full of gadgets. There was a toast machine. Everything was there. And you had the feeling, when you see this picture, I think it's in London, you want to go away of that. And I have the feeling that when we talk about city and technology nowadays, with thousands of sensors, with lots of plastics, with dashboards, I want to go away. I want to go to a city without anything. Please bring me the city with the streets, with the lampposts, with some security, and forget me, please. I don't want to be tracked. I don't want to go to the... I have no conversation with the city hall at all, because the only conversation that I have is just to pay taxes or pay the las multas, the fines. Please leave me alone. So I think that what's next, and I'm very serious on that, what's next is a city. But this could be blah, 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 or playing the violin, as when you listen to people saying that we have to be people-centric. Franco, the guy that used to rule us, said the same thing. I want peace for you. People is first. Thank you very much. So, no, please, no more blah, blah. I think that what's next is how can we use technology, 21st century technology, to make better cities? Which means, how can we make our streets better? How can we make our security better? Simple things. How can we tear down the walls between security and lighting? How can we make sure that law enforcement happens without having to have a policeman everywhere? How can we empower the owners of, for example, something that happens in Barcelona, that happens here in Cannes? Just thinking a little bit. I'm sure, well, yesterday night I experienced it. In Cannes, the weather is very good, so there are terraces. But I had to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to sleep, but there were a group of people having fun. I think that they had to be here at 8 o'clock today also, but they are not.
I think they were from, they were from Leeds. Okay.
So these guys, I'm sure that Cannes has got a kind of a limit of decibels that you can, there's a limit for that, and the owner of the bar is responsible for that, but if he hasn't got an inspector there, how the hell? Well, technology can solve these things with the cooperation of the owner of the bar. Is anyone coming after that? So all these technology companies cannot give an answer to that. And the problem that the smart city movement has today, and by the way, this is a real estate event, which means, because in here we're all very sympathetic and we all get along very well, but Belfast is fighting against London, and London is fighting against Manchester. So let's be serious on that. People are going to go where services are better and where identity and differentiation is better, and when me and my family can feel better. And that's how Barcelona did it, and that's why we chose for that. And this is very important, because here good words are very nice, but this is about competition, and competition is based on services. So the problem that we have is that the industry has been ahead of the client for much too long. What do I mean by that? I mean that the industry, very intelligent companies, I'm going to put in here, I don't know, the Ciscos, the IBMs of the world, whatsoever, all that, but also the Deloittes and the consultants, the big firms. You are far ahead of the cities. You lack clients. And the problem is that the client, the city, represented by the mayors and the civil servants, have not been able to sit and think, what kind of services do we need in order to make our cities more competitive? Which means that if we put more value into our public realm, the private or the domestic real estate realm, the assets that are here at stake, are going to grow in terms of value. And this is the real fight that we have. And this is what is next for me. How do we make, as clients on the one hand and as suppliers on the other hand, how do we make the value of our cities grow? That's the main issue. And then we can have a discussion on what does it mean to grow in terms of value. We can discuss. There's a social, how to say, there's a social balance and there's a financial balance, okay? And we have to manage them all. Depending on what role is yours, you will take care of one or the other. I think that the mayor has to take care of both. But depending if you are a supplier or you are a municipal company. But for me, what's next is how do we make this digital world to bring us new services that we had never thought about, that will improve, that will increase our identity, our sense of community, our jobs opportunity, so on and so forth.
Great. Tony, thank you very much indeed. Let's give him a round of applause as well, if we may. So you started with this kind of techno-dystopia that Richard Hamilton painted back in the 60s, and I think that a lot of people probably have experienced this emotionally. And then you went on to talk about the importance of recognizing that what comes next is a city, and it's a better city. And then you talked, Tony, very engagingly about how to make a better city, and you recognize that it's somehow about the city itself, the city government, the city leadership becoming a smarter, more intelligent, more informed client. You talked about recognizing that there's an outcome competition going on, and then you talked in the end about the promise of technology being the way to create new value and better services and a better city in all its senses. Thank you very much indeed. Just one final call, ladies and gents. There are some seats down at the front. If you'd like to come and sit down, we'd love to have you further up, but thank you for being here. Simon, you've been listening to all of this. You're developing the city advisory practice at Deloitte. Give us your reflections, please.
Well, if I thought there was nothing else to say after Suzanne, I definitely think there's nothing else to say now, Tony. Thank you for that. But I will try and find three things just to round off the sort of session. And what I've tried to do is to think about what's happening in a global context, what's happening in a European context, and then maybe something for the majority of our audience here, which are obviously from Manchester, because I think there is something local about this topic that we could take away this morning. What I've noticed about smart cities and technology-enabled cities is the amount of noise. It is a very noisy space at the moment, and in a global context you can get confused and a bit lost. In India or in China we're talking about rapid urbanization. In Africa, rapid urbanization seems to be the buzzword for smart cities, so it's all about big infrastructure, it's all about big investment projects. You go to the US, I think they are grappling with the idea of getting out of the car. I'm not quite sure how far they're going to get with that, but it's all about mobility. So it's all about cities saying, we're going to change the way in which people move around cities. And that seems to be the way they want to go. Europe's very different. We live in a very mature, Roman and Greeks were mentioned earlier. You know, we live in a very mature city landscape where actually most of the built environment is with us, it's here. It's all about making it a better place for our citizens to live in, and it's a different set of challenges that I think we face in Europe, and it's fascinating. And I think what you could hear from this morning's speakers is that both the passion and enthusiasm for the debate about what next, but also the recognition that actually it's not just about technology, it's about the impact on the citizen and the people that we need to focus on. So for us, I think that's where we want to sort of help. And I think the thing that I notice more than anything else at the moment about the debate is around citizen engagement and the way in which citizens are not engaged in what's happening in their city. We see that through political movements and political change, certainly in your part of the world and actually in your part of the world and probably in other parts of the world too. You know, citizens are beginning to say, we want different things for our city in a way that they haven't said it for a little while. And actually, we're not keeping up with that, and we're not keeping up with the debate in, for example, social media platforms or other forms of communicative technology that we need to use if we are going to make sure that we engage in that debate with our citizens. And it becomes particularly pertinent, I think, in an environment where social inequality has become a very, very big topic. And it's a big topic in the UK, it's a big topic across Europe. This issue that emerges all the time is one of how are we going to make cities good and great for everybody rather than just some of our community. So let's look at Manchester and let's look at what's coming up for Manchester. And I think there are some particular issues for Manchester around this space that give an opportunity to the city. So the city is, for the first time in a long time, producing its new spatial framework for a community of 2.9 million people. It will be published in June this year. It's a brave and bold attempt to bring 10 different districts together under one banner. And I think it would be fair to say that we're really looking forward to what we're going to say about Manchester and its future to the world and also to its local citizens. How we communicate what we are trying to do with that plan is really critical in my view, and the use of technology and technology-enabled devices to enable us to reach out to everybody in Greater Manchester will be crucial. So what I want to see more of through this debate is the use of these good tools that we have to make sure that everybody is involved and make sure that everybody is engaged in the debate about their city as we move forward.
Great, Simon. Thank you very much indeed. So you gave us a very helpful global scan of issues, and you came down, I think, to this critical issue of citizen engagement and tackling social inequality, and I hope we'll come back to this in the panel. And then you gave the example of Manchester and using, as it were, digital communications and new technologies in the planning of the city, and how you make planning a much more participative process using new technology. Very, very helpful. Now, ladies and gents, we've got time now for a conversation with our panel. And I've got lots of questions, but my questions are not better than your questions. So we'd like to have some from you. And I'd like to see who'd like to come into the conversation. Normally what we do is say, please raise your hands. That gives me a sense of how many of you want to participate. And then we'll see if we do one at a time or we'll do them in some groups. So who'd like to put a question or make a point to our panel? So we've got 1, 2, don't be shy, 3, don't have to be a man to ask a question. Anybody else? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Have we got handheld mics for them? We have. Okay. Richard, if you could come down here. We've sort of got you and is it you, sir? No, you. 1, 2, and then the gentleman behind. So if we start with these 3. Panellists, what I'm going to ask you to do is just listen to the questions and be ready to answer 1 or 2 of them. Don't answer all of them, okay? Ewan.
Okay, well, question for Miguel and then maybe the others. So I'm fascinated by your participatory budget concept. Can you share, have there been any downsides of that, such as the tyranny of the majority, maybe the more populous areas voting for projects that suit them? As a Brit, we've had an experience of direct democracy and the results that can come from that, and they're not always potentially advantageous for the greater good. And then maybe the other cities, have you thought about that? Because your point about the trust gap with politicians and citizens, this seems to be one way to perhaps close that gap. So I'm interested if other cities are thinking of similar things. It's a fascinating concept.
Great, yes. So the lived experience of participatory budgeting. If you could pass the mic behind you, Ewan, that'd be great. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. I had a question for Suzanne, which is quite a simple question. How did Belfast deliver a 100 gigabyte link to the States?
Yeah.
Because this seems to be sort of an obvious question, and it seems to be that every city needs a 100 megabyte or gigabyte link to the States, and also between cities. It seems to be the fundamental infrastructure and a prerequisite to doing virtually everything that we're talking about.
Very good, sir. If you pass the microphone 3 gentlemen back, that would be incredibly helpful. There we are.
Good morning, Mo Perkins from Skanska. It's a similar question to you in some respect, but perhaps a harder question, and that's the protection of data. So in the Internet of Things and sharing all that data, and I know from our own perspective, we're doing some work on BIM and digital engineering and how you protect the data for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons. How do you protect the use of that data going forward?
Okay, so it's to do with data and data protection. Other people waiting to ask a question? Okay, yes, madam, if you keep your hand up. Richard, right next to you. Thank you.
In technology, you find that it's the younger people that are at schools that are obviously the most knowledgeable, and actually people running business, we don't really know what it is. It's the 17, 18-year-olds. How do you decide, if these 17, 18-year-olds come up with a good idea, who to go with? Because actually the people making the overall decisions are nowhere near as clued up on technology.
Yeah, so who knows what to back? Yeah, great question. Who else is waiting? Okay, can we take those 4 questions then? I'll ask you just to comment on 1 or 2 each. So the first one was about participatory budgeting. What was the real experience in Cascais? Sorry about this, my microphone. microphone's dropped off. The real experience in Cascais, and others who might want to comment advantages and disadvantages. Suzanne, how did you get the 100 gigabyte transatlantic subterranean link? Questions about data protection and the interface between, as it were, the use of data and civil liberties. And then this question about, in a sense, how do you know which applications or which innovations are worthy of support? Simon, why don't you begin with one or two, and we'll come this way back along the panel.
Okay. Well, I think the one I will pick up on is the 17 and 18-year-old or even younger members of the community, and what they think and what we think. And frankly, we're going to have to sort of not be here and have other people here bringing forward some of these ideas. So there is an absolute requirement for more innovation and more involvement of younger members of the community in the advancement of this agenda. I suppose my only sort of thought process is that the cities need to set some strategy of sorts within which that can be that technology can be incubated. And I think one of the things that Anthony was touching on was the fact that everybody's sort of got ahead of the cities, if you like. Well, the cities need to start saying to themselves, well, where do we want to be, and what sort of policies do we want to develop, and then invite the community to come forward with the tools, if you like, that we need to take those ideas forward. So yes, I agree. Absolutely, we need a more inclusive and reaching out strategy in those terms. I'm not going to answer anything else.
Okay, Tony.
I'm going to pick this one for a second. I think that we have to make sure that we let the kids not to be seen as kids anymore, because they have the imagination that we lack, and they are braver than we are. And it is for the cities and for the communities to set the table, to let them show what they're capable of. And they have invented the term hackathon, and they have invented all these systems by which they decide by themselves. I could explain to you how we did it in my city when I was in office. It worked pretty well. I won't do it. I'm just going to put you an example of today in a place not as obvious as Barcelona or Europe or America. Pune, India. Some of you know that we work there. We are developing there. We are rethinking the markets in Pune. And you know that if you've been to India, that market in India is an issue, because I would say 60% of the buying and selling does not happen in formal markets. It happens right in the street, in the middle of nowhere, without any kind of sanitation guarantees, so on and so forth. So what we decided to do, rather than going to very good architects and very good technological guys, and they have them, as good at the least as we have, we decided to go to the universities, to the third grade up to fifth grade, and they have given us the solution for that, because they are not tied to any sort of constraint of anything. And you cannot imagine the kind of solutions that we've got for Pune OTA markets, which means street markets. And the other one is about participatory budget. I share your absolutely your fears. I think that it works for a certain type of community, very, as the deputy mayor said, talking about Qashqai, very consolidated. He said that he didn't want to call himself a city, he called himself a town. Very short experience in Barcelona. 7 or 8 years ago, Barcelona has participatory budget. After 3 or 4 years, there was 1 year in which the only participant in the participatory budget was Erasmus student from Italy that couldn't vote, neither decide anything on the budget. It is a real case, that's for real. But I want to put that into perspective, because once again, when we talk about participation hides lots of times the incapacity of politics and academy to give an answer to the problems that we have with representative democracy, which, by the way, is the best system that we have on the table.
Thank you very much, Tony. I hear a lot of people in the room sort of agreeing with you quietly there. Just as a matter of interest, before we go on, how many people in the room think that more participatory budgeting in cities would be a good idea? If you think it would be, please raise your hands. Okay? If you think it would not be, please raise your hands. Oh, it's almost even, the numbers, but there's a large number of absenters, and that's probably why we don't need participatory budgeting, because a lot of people are not voting, but there we go. Roughly half and half, I would say. Suzanne, will you pick up 1 or 2 points?
Yeah, first of all, the direct question to me, I think we were lucky in terms of our geography and location, to be quite honest, because, of course, we sit right between Europe and the US. So that cable goes right into Europe as well. So it was a cocktail of funding. It's called Project Kelvin. If you want to Google it, you can see how it was put together. But it was a cocktail of funding from US, UK, and Europe and Southern Ireland as well. So it connects to different parts of Europe too. And on skills, just to pick up on the point on skills and young people, I think it's a really fundamental question for all of our cities, because those ideas really do come from those young minds, and we really have to stimulate that. I think you can do that at the city level. Some of the things we've been doing, in fact, Deloitte, Simon, are running some academies for young people just coming out of school and into universities and further education as well. They're running academies in robotics and in AI, for example, and also those young people, I think, seeing the types of jobs that they can go into in the future. And I think that schools have a big job to demonstrate to their pupils that these really are the jobs of the future. They cannot keep pumping out kids to go into law, to go into medicine, etc. They need to be thinking of these tech jobs, and of course getting venture capitalists around that. So you asked about how do you know they're good ideas. Well, we have to take a bit of a risk, to be honest, and let them try out those ideas. And I think we have developed some, we have a Google lab in Belfast, we have an immersive technology hub in Belfast too, so you can come along to those hubs and you can actually try out your ideas and use the technology that we have there. And then we put some of the venture capitalists, etc., around those young people. We've done, so they can develop their ideas, and we've done some things like Mass Challenge, for example, which is set up in Boston, and brought that and done boot camps, etc., in the city with young people. So there's certainly a lot of techniques to get those ideas to fruition.
Great, thank you very much. Let's have a reflection from Kashkais, perhaps starting with your experience of participatory democracy.
Let me talk and tell you that we have started participatory budgeting together with Barcelona, actually, because we both cities were leading ICLEI, that is an association for participatory budgeting systems around the world. And our experience is different than Barcelona's experience, because for the last 7 years we have increased every year the number of people engaged. And how people can engage, it's not just by voting. The process starts with more than 1,000 citizens meeting in small assemblies all over the municipality for 2 months, thinking about what would be the best projects to do in their own community, new roads, new schools, new infrastructures, a 2 months process with more than 1,000 citizens engaged. Then, from that process, maybe we get 30 projects or so for the voting process. Of course, we have downsides, and we have, for the last 7 years, we have changed the rules every year, because in the first years we used to have people buying votes. The fire department, because the fire department is a department with more than 1,000 people, and of course they have a lot of votes, and we have to change the process. That's why we still, the democracy, participatory budgeting systems and the participatory democracy doesn't allow us to allow us politicians to be completely away. We need governing bodies. Of course, we need to regulate, and that's why we are there. We have changed the rules for the last 7 years to mitigate those risks, of course, those downsides. But the balance is quite impressive now, because people more and more want to do things. And let me tell you another thing. 90% of those projects that goes voting 90% or more are projects that we already have in pipeline in our municipality. Ideas from my colleagues in the municipality, and we have more than 3,000 employees in the municipality. And what participatory budget system gives us is a sense of priority. Is a sense, if this project is the most voted one, we need to put it in the top of our priorities. And we have a rule in the municipality. For those projects, we have a timeline of 2 years from the beginning of the construction to the end. And that builds up trust between politicians, between the municipality and citizens. And citizens, year after year, they see that if they vote to a project, if that project is good for the community, the project will be done in 2 years' time. And we have that rule that nowadays we have 90% of the projects approved 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, already finished, and we are finishing the last 10%. That builds up trust, because politicians, to win elections, they say a lot of things. They will do everything. They will change the world. And then nothing happens. Participatory budget helps us in the decision-making process of the politicians, because we don't know everything. We must keep in touch with the citizens for the 4-year term. I've been elected for a 4-year term, and in between, I need the participatory budget system, but more systems like the city points, like all the apps that we already have in place, social media, to contact with our citizens in a daily basis and not just every 4 years.
Miguel, thank you very much indeed. So you said a very key point, which is that the projects that are put forward for the participatory vote are, in a sense, pre-selected and pre-planned. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Richard, your reflections.
Well, I want to pick up 2 of them. The first I want to pick up is on participatory budgets, where what I want to have is a city which is more participatory, but not to have participatory budgeting. And there's a reason for that. It's what we spend our money on. It's a point that I think Tony alluded to. For a council like Manchester, 2/3 of our net expenditure is on a very small number of people. It is on children with very high levels of need. It's with adults with very high levels of need, and almost by definition that they are people who are pretty much powerless within the system. And part of our job as a council is to support those people who are powerless within the system. Having said that, we do want to have a more participatory system. So when we're setting our budget this year, part of the basis of that is a conversation with Manchester people about what is important to them. Actually, in that conversation, what they said was most important to them are those things that are caring about people. So we do put that at the top of our list. And also, it's then how we provide those services to people. And we will talk now, I think, again, Tony, I think you referred to co-creation. We will talk about co-design, that instead of doing things to people, we now do things with people. And we get even those people who are relatively powerless to be part of the design process of what it is needed to provide them with the right support. Sort of slightly leads me into the other bit is that 17-year-olds do not have a monopoly of ideas. One of my former council colleagues who was somebody who every time I met him, he was older than me, even older than me, every time I met him he'd always read something, seen something, heard something. Every time I met him there was always something new on his agenda. And actually 70-year-olds are as capable of having new ideas as 20-year-olds are. It is about harnessing all of that. And actually the things that Suzanne talked about all the labs, we've got Mad Lab and we've got hackathons and so on, that really is not what generates ideas and turns those ideas into things. What you need in the first place is a city where people with ideas want to live. The single most important thing we do about creating the growth economy in the City of Manchester is the City of Manchester, above anywhere else in England at the moment, is where people with ideas want to live. It's a great place to live. Everything else will flow from that if you've created that great place to live. And there are a whole range of stuff that goes with what makes a great place to live. But again, I think it's you again, Tony. You talked about the beach. We haven't got a beach in Manchester, but that's where you want to be. You want to have the equivalent of the beach, to have the people there who create the ideas, and that's what creates your economy and your thriving city.
Great, Richard. Thank you very much indeed. Now, ladies and gents, we've run out of time because the conversation's been very interesting. We've discussed everything from smart cities and whether that's a helpful phrase, to all of the different technologies and applications that are emerging. We've heard almost everybody on the panel say it's all about citizens, and we've heard Sir Richard Leese just say it's all about creating the kind of city where people actually want to live. But meanwhile, we've gone through a discussion about participatory democracy. We've talked a little bit about the economic sectors and the job sectors that are being really encouraged and accelerated by technology. And we've talked about the fundamental requirement for digital infrastructure for our cities to make sure that our cities are able to make the most of it. I'm going to ask you in a moment to say thank you very much to our panel, but I'm going to see whether Simon on behalf of Deloitte and Sir Richard on behalf of Manchester want to say anything else to close the seminar.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming along today, for sharing their ideas with us and making sure that we've had a really good conversation this morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.